So what other things have you seen on TV and movies about interviews that are just BS?
Where they're, physically abusing them.
You can't do that?
No, you cannot.
Welcome to Shooting Straight with Brad and David. I'm Brad Carline, your Navajo County attorney, and unfortunately Sheriff Klaus can't join us this month, but he sent...
I'm Brian Swanty. I'm the Chief Deputy with the Navajo County Sheriff's Office.
And this episode is a continuation as we talk about how law enforcement and prosecution work together from that 911 call until charges are filed on a defendant. And this is our continuation of that discussion. One of the things, Bruce, that caught my attention of what you just said is you have identified who's the best at different tasks, be it interviews, doing search warrants. So we're actually utilizing the best of the law enforcement in our county. Is this also a training opportunity where there may be a less experienced officer that is partnered with that experienced one so they can learn?
Absolutely. If we're not mentoring and training and exposing, then we're going to run out of people, because people retire, they move on, they promote, what have you, and we're always trying to prepare somebody to take that next spot. We're preparing people to take Bruce's spot. We're preparing people to take my spot.
You're irreplaceable.
I don't know about that, but so one thing that I just want to circle back around and touch on is, the partnership and cooperation that we have in law enforcement here in our county is phenomenal, but also the partnership with your office is phenomenal. Every time, tell me if I'm wrong, every time we place a call to Mr. Carline or his staff, we always have a response. Somebody comes to the scene and is with us hand in hand all the way through the case, and that's not the case in all jurisdictions.
But it's the partnerships that we've developed here in Navajo County that make us much more effective.
Right.
And I mentioned CSI as you're talking about all the evidence you're collecting. One of the biggest battles that we sometimes face in a trial is having the jurors understand what they see in movies and TV is not always accurate. I know you talked about, Bruce, search warrants, but there could be multiple search warrants.
Absolutely.
Let's say you got a search warrant for the house, you found somebody's cell phone. Do you need another search warrant?
We will seize the device,
right?
Whether it be a cell phone, it could be an Xbox, it could be a computer or laptop. We will seize the device, and then we will write a specific court order to forensically get into that, capture the data, and preserve that for both you and the defense.
So what is in a search warrant?
So, the nice part for us is that Arizona Revised Statutes offers some specific verbiage about what should be in a search warrant. Aside from that, we have our supporting basis, which is what we've learned. Doesn't have to be everything, but we do want to make sure we've incorporated what we have learned that will tell a judge why a crime has been committed and why evidence is to be recovered if we do the search warrant at this location or in this vehicle or in this device. Furthermore, the search warrant allows us to legally get into those with a forensic, let's say if it's a cell phone, we have an expert who forensically examines that device with a ability not to change anything on that phone, but to just capture an image of what's on that phone.
Right, one of the things you said is for a judge. So is there a judge involved in this process when it comes to search warrants?
Absolutely. So one of the benefits or one of the good things about our system of justice is there's always a check and a balance. So, for instance, when it comes to charging, your charging attorneys are our check and balance to make sure that we are doing our job. They go through the document to make sure that we have exemplified that probable cause exists, and furthermore, that there's reason to believe this person should be charged through their experience as attorneys. The judge looks at our search warrant and says, okay, there's probable cause here, or maybe there's not. Maybe it's old information or stale information that the judge may say, you need to be able to prove to me that there's really evidence there. And then the judge will not sign our search warrant.
So one of the advantages of the collaboration we've been talking about is one of my prosecutors, myself, might be there reviewing your search warrant before you submit it to the judge.
Oftentimes, especially in a major case, one of the first things I do when I call out the task force is I notify one of your major crimes prosecutors who are very learned or experienced in prosecuting these crimes. I don't go to your junior, newer attorneys. They're still learning, just like my detectives and deputies are. I go to one of your senior prosecutors who are able to help me. I bounce things off, make sure that I'm doing good legal decisions from my perspective.
And that wasn't always the case. I remember my first month in Navajo County, my first month doing criminal work at all, and I have a law enforcement agency saying, help me with this search warrant.
Are you talking about when the roads were still dirt here in Navajo County?
Pretty close. Another big thing you see in TVs and the movies are those interrogations of the suspects.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do what we see on TV really match up with real life?
No.
No, why not?
No. So we are very cautious. We're very respectful to everyone because, let's face it, not everyone is a suspect. So when we're interviewing them, they may be a victim. Until we know more, we need to treat them appropriately and respectfully. Typically, I'll have 2 detectives conduct an interview, one who's listening for responses, while the other is asking questions, and then they will trade off. We'll make sure that person gets an opportunity to use the restroom, get a drink, make sure that they are, if they're injured, that they receive medical attention. Just like anyone else, we want to make sure that their rights are protected and they're treated respectfully.
In some movies, you see cops making threats. They turn off the recorder and do whatever.
Your office would have a heyday with that because you just dismissed the case. We can't do that. We can't do that.
And my prosecutors on these big cases often watch the interviews because we may have follow-up questions that we want to address too. If we think that we hear what a potential defense might be, we want you guys to ask questions to slam the door on those potential defenses if we can slam the door, and maybe they have a good defense, but we want to know that too.
Correct.
So we'll make sure that we flush it out. So what other things have you seen on TV and movies about interviews that are just BS?
Where they're, physically abusing them.
You can't do that?
No, you cannot. I watch the cop shows and you're like, this is nowhere of anything I've ever been taught. It's just not, it's Hollywood. They've got an hour show, they make it look very glamorous, and sometimes our job is not glamorous at all. It is a lot of sitting behind a keyboard, writing reports, listening to recordings. And you notice on CSI, they never write a report. They investigate, they get their confession, and next thing you know, the guy's in prison, all in a 1-hour show. Some of these things take years, absolute years, to get the case completed and prosecuted.
So is it easy to make an arrest? Is that an easy call, or what do you look for before you decide to make an arrest?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. So there are a lot of factors that go into our decision to take someone into custody, detain them. That's one of the biggest things we could potentially do to someone, is put them in jail. So obviously we look at all the evidence cumulatively between the witness statements. Does the witness statements corroborate what we see physically, what we've learned from testing? So sometimes we may not make an arrest. There are times when I am pretty confident that this person has committed a murder, but I just am not there to take that step of taking them into custody. I've waited on occasion, sometimes months before I make an arrest, to be absolutely certain that when I make that arrest, because there are time limits that become engaged when an arrest is made, that I don't want to be in a position where I make an arrest and they get out.
Because they have to be charged within that 48 hours after their arrest.
Correct.
And if you can't get me sufficient evidence that I believe that I can prove them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt with admissible evidence at trial, I can't file charges.
And by booking somebody, I think booking them into jail, I think sometimes people look at that as that's starting their punishment. The intention behind putting them in jail is to secure them, is to protect the public from further threat, or if the person is capable of fleeing the area. A lot of times if the person is invested in the community, they don't have a criminal history or whatnot, they may not get booked into jail because there's no threat of them fleeing
And it
the
depends
area.
on the severity of the crime.
Correct.
All right, so some things that you do when you investigate a crime might seem a little mundane. And that's especially, from my viewpoint, processing the crime scene, but yet that can be some of the most important
Correct.
evidence that you gather. So what is the process that you use to process a crime scene?
Well, first of all, we want to secure the scene, make sure that it's going to be the same as when we were able to get there and make the scene safe.
So how do you secure a scene?
So we begin by using crime scene tape and keeping people who were in the scene separated and out of the scene.
Okay, but how big is the scene? Because you talked about multiple spots that you got to do things on. So say the shooting took place in the house, but yet the suspect fled in a car, so is the whole yard now the crime
the larger
scene?
the scene, the better. We cannot.
The better?
Yes, the better, because
Why?
there's evidence we don't know where it is until
Okay.
we're actually processing it. If we shrink it and we just use the house, what happens if there's evidence out in the yard that we did not preserve, or there's going to be an argument that we didn't preserve it? So we start big and work our way in. We begin perhaps by using a drone, modern technology. It's huge today. Jurors like to get that feel of being there. One of the things we can use is what's called the FARO scanner, F-A-R-O. It's a 3D scanner that takes color images or black and white images if it's low light. It's amazing.
And I can tell you from a prosecutor's perspective, CSI is a pain because it's not like it's on scene, but yet people are used to TV and movies.
Right.
You know, usually the opening scene in a movie is this big overhead shot that's bringing you down. And that's why I love your drones, because I can start off my case with that overhead shot to set the scene just like they do in the movies. And then people love these technology you talked about. I don't even remember what the term was that you used.
The FARO scanner.
What is a FARO scanner? What does that do?
What a FARO scanner is capable of doing is we position it, let's say in some scenes, 6, 8 different positions. It takes a 360 scan. It moves literally 360 degrees, shooting a laser up and down while it's also taking images. That laser bounces off of different objects. So down the road, if I needed to know how far you and I are sitting apart, if I were to scan you and I through a scanner, that computer-produced image, I can draw a line between you and I and see exactly how far you and I are apart.
So it's actually taking measurements?
Correct.
Yeah,
So it could tell me how far it is from door A to door B.
absolutely.
Yes. Originally, it's something that was used in architecture and engineering, but it's a tool that we've recognized has value in crime scenes and documentation of a crime scene.
And you say it's a three-dimensional imagery that it creates?
Correct.
And you can then change the view. So if you were trying to show what the victim's view was at a time, you could put them somewhere?
You can rotate it. You can go all different directions where you can have a top view. You can rotate the view where you're down inside the scene and walk through it in a roundabout way. You can see where everything is at.
Yeah, things have changed a lot since I did lots of trials. We had a
yeah.
little bit of that, but it wasn't architectural software that we played with.
Back in the old days, I'm sure you remember you'd have a string and a measuring tape and all kinds of stuff.
Previously, we had something that just did point A to point
Right.
B, and it just plotted something on a map, basically. This is amazing new technology.
So say there was a bullet hole or holes in a wall. Is it picking those up too? And can it determine what angle that bullet entered the wall? Or do you have other tools that you can use for that type of stuff?
Both. So we would use some specialized tools, but in addition to that FARO scanner, the specialized tools would help us identify. It just depends on the magnitude of damage. If it's a small hole, then we may be able to get a very articulate decision on the angle. But if it's a large hole, obviously, like a shotgun,
shotgun
that's
blast.
much more difficult.
All right, so are you using the drone and the straight up regular camera and this FARO tool before your crime scene techs get in there and start
Correct.
really looking at stuff? Why are you doing that stuff first?
Because what happens if we're human, if you accidentally bump into, kick, change something, we have to explain, we document what we've done, but there's that potential for changing that evidence. The first thing we want to do is photograph, scan, preserve what it looks like. Then we'll mark and collect. So we may walk through a scene individually and mark things so the scanner can identify where they are with a placard, but we don't move it, if that makes sense or provides clarity.
We try to get that scene as crystal clean as it was when the incident occurred. Now, obviously, it'll never be 100% because you've got the initial responding police officer or deputy coming into the scene and may have to move a chair or whatever to attend to the victim. You got the fire department that comes in or EMS that comes in. They're going to move things out of the way because their focus is the victim. So there may be some things that are moved,
and
but
the victim may not be there.
Correct. But we want to try to keep that as pristine as we possibly can.
And does it help with all the body cameras? Because your officer is the first one in, so his body camera is picking it up. So
those all become evidence. Those all become evidence. Yeah.
Okay. We've had shootings where that's been impactful. Being able to go back to look at the body camera and it goes. Then a deputy under stress may not remember something they've done, like rolling a victim in a shooting to provide that first aid. And then when things are calmed down and that person's deceased, they may not remember that they actually moved them to check on their welfare, check for a pulse, what have you.
Adrenaline's up, and you're worried about the scene, the suspect, where they are, your safety. So Bruce, what it sounds like to me is you're taking this broad view and getting narrower and narrower and narrower as you go along.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So we'll just go to the room where the shooting took place. Your crime scene techs come in. What are they focused on? Are they starting broad and going narrow? Are they starting from basically the doorway where they enter and work out from there? How does that work?
Good. So
everything is just, it's in layers. And so once you get to the point where the actual crime took place, obviously there's going to be all kinds of evidence around there. It could be blood splatter, it could be DNA, it could be the victim's DNA and blood from the other person, and they have to go around and find this stuff. If it's splattered on the wall, splattered on the bed, whatever the case may be, and they systematically work through that area, capturing all that exactly where each piece is at, because a piece of blood splatter over there might be a key piece of evidence onto where the shooter was standing to where the victim was at. The direction. If you've got multiple people that could have been the shooter, well, then that piece of blood splatter over there could lead to where the shooter was standing. So it's very critical in there, and it's very precise work.
And that's an interesting choice of words, precise work. Because of that, is there specialized training they get? Mm-hmm, yeah. Because there may be things that at first glance may not look like evidence, but Correct. It could be important.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about spatter for just a second. Yeah. High velocity spatter, someone struck by a bullet, when that bullet passes through them, that spatter is going to go on whatever structure might be behind them, let's say a wall. One of the first things we want to do is capture that overall wall without anything that's interfering. Then we're going to start taking measurements because the angle tells a story. Mm-hmm. And through experts or even trained staff that we have, we can identify angles of impact from that spatter on the wall.
So is there specialized training? Clearly blood splatter is a specialized, but just your crime scene people, they will be able to identify splatter is important, get what they need for the expert who will analyze it. But is there special classes they take to learn what to look for, learn how to gather it without compromising the integrity of that evidence?
There is hundreds of different types of classes, from blood splatter to DNA to lighting. There's just hundreds of different types of classes, and it's a heck of an investment. And these detectives and these crime scene techs that come into this, it's a never. You never get to the point where you're like, okay, I got it. Because it's ever so changing. Same thing in your business. Same thing in the regular patrol deputies. But these people always have to continually keep up that continuing training to stay up to speed with the latest and greatest technology.
And we never know what technology is going to come in the future. Yeah. And how something that we collect now in a cold case may be of value 10 years from now.
Just like DNA.
When I started, DNA wasn't around. In 97, it was a new thing for us in my agency, and we had to learn how to accommodate.
Same
in
thing.
the 80s, it's the same way.
Same thing with downloading a phone. We didn't download phones
Right.
in the 80s. You know, it wasn't.
Or
the
do cell
technology
phone
wasn't there.
records and geolocation.
And it's hard to believe, but we're out of time again. Thank you for joining us for Shooting Straight with Brad and David, and we'll continue this conversation again in our next month's episode.